Good morning. One of these days I'm going to get tired of the theme from Cold to Hard, but that is not going to be today. I love that piece of music. So, if you're in California with me, good morning. If you're in another time zone, good evening, good afternoon, or good night, depending on where you are. But to everybody, welcome back. We're going to continue on with modding live streams today. The tentative plan is we're going to start doing a little bit more work with the community item pack, catching up on bug fixes and a few other things, and then we'll go from there. First, I have a little bit of housekeeping to do from yesterday's stream. Now, I am very embarrassed that I spent 2 hours talking about spells and items and the IESDP, and I did not once mention the great work that Lynx is doing in maintaining it. Lynx is the current maintainer of the ISDP. It used to be Icky. I always try to make sure that like the people who do a lot of these tools and maintain tools like this get credit, right? And it's one of the reasons why in my README there's always like a tools used in creation, because like tool makers don't get enough credit for the work they do, and same with Lynx. So Lynx does Gem RGB, which is the open source Infinity engine, which is outstanding, right? If you ever want to play with 10 party members, Gem RB is how you do it. You're not going to be able to do that with the original or the E's. So Gem RGB is amazing, but Lynx is also the current maintainer of the ISDP. So I'm very disappointed that I went all that time and not once I mentioned Lynx. So he's Wandering Quill. If you're on the G3 Discord, he's awesome, knows a lot, maintains the ISDP, which is fantastic. So I'm very embarrassed I didn't mention that yesterday. So that's the first little bit of housekeeping. The second bit of housekeeping was going to be... there's one thing. We talked a lot about spell effects, but I realized I left out one little minor thing that I'd just like to cover very, very quickly for spells. So let me pull up a... Find familiar, we'll do it. So items have global effects that are essentially equipping effects, right? When you equip the item, those effects, happen. When you take the item off, if the timing is right, those effects go away. Spells also they're not equipping effects, but they also have global effects. Very, very, very few spells use them. I'm using Find Familiar because this is one that I know does something. Now, these work very differently than global effects on items. Global effects on items are usually stuff, they're equipping, right? You put it on, those effects go into effect. You take them off, they go away. For spells, these effects work no matter what level the spell is cast at. But the big, major, important difference is that they are instant. So if you, for example, Find Familiar, right? You cast Find Familiar, it takes a 3 casting speed, and then your familiar summoning happens. However, this one global effect here, the moment you cast Find Familiar, before the casting animation, before the sound, this happens immediately. So there are a few tricks. This opens up a few tricks you can do. In this case, the only reason why this is here is that when you cast Find Familiar, it sets the variable tootfamo1 to a value of 1. It sets a global variable, but that's all it does. This variable it's used in the tutorial to prevent you from summoning a familiar. So basically, all the tutorial areas look for this variable, and if it's set, it basically interrupts your casting. So this is one of the places where they take advantage of the fact that this global effect happens instantly before your casting is finished, and it uses it to interrupt you and say, no familiars in the tutorial. That's literally all it does. I think there are a few other places where it's used, but this is the one I always remember because we had to do a fix for this in the BG2 fix packs. That's why I remember this. So it's a little bit niche, but there are some fun things you can do with this. For example, one of the things that I didn't touch on this too much with AI scripting, but one of the things that it is just absolutely abysmal about is spatial awareness, right? As a player, if there's, 3 enemies attacking me and I've got a fireball, I can, kind of do the geometry and figure out where it needs to go to hit all 3 enemies, right? There's no easy way to do that for AI scripting. Spatial awareness is terrible. AI almost always will cast it at a creature because you can't be like, cast it 200 pixels to the right of it so you get the other guy. There's no casting commands that do that. So there are a few tricks you can do. For example, I know David gets around, how you can't cast spells directly at creatures that are under improved invisibility. Well, if they have an AoE, you get around it by you basically create a small invisible creature next to it and then cast at the invisible creature, and then the AoE catches the person under improved invisibility, right? So that's kind of one spatial awareness trick. You can use global variables. For example, like if you're casting Fireball, you could have a global effect that basically summons a creature, like an invisible one, that is basically named like Fireball. And so that gives, and then script enemies to run away from that point, right? If the Fireball creature appears, run away because a Fireball is about to be targeted to that location. So it's one way that you could do spatial awareness, right? You could have AI react by moving away from the center. And I know SCS does this for moving creatures out of clouds. Basically, if there's a cloud kill or like a lingering effect, like a web or something, it does this trick. It puts an invisible creature in the middle of the cloud, and then you can do a range check, right? Am I 15 feet away from this creature? Then I'm out of the stinking cloud and I'm safe, or I'm out of the cloud kill and I'm safe. But you can also do this for instant things like Fireball, right? You can use the global effects to have a creature appear immediately, like this is where the Fireball is coming, and if I've got the time, get out of the area of effect. So it's niche, but there are uses for this. So I realized I didn't cover global effects for spells at all. So I just want to touch on that as a little bit of housekeeping. Other than that, I think we went probably more into depth about spells than probably anybody ever wanted. So, but I did want to just add that last little bit for spells. So that's kind of it for my housekeeping. So outside of that, though, I wanted to get back into what I wanted to do yesterday, but I wasn't prepared, and that's getting back to a few things for the community item pack. So the first thing I want to do is catch up on. There were a few changes that were made since we last did work on stream, so I just want to cover that really quick because the whole point of this is that the whole thing is being developed live on stream. So this was our last. This commit was our last one before the release. Add some library updates. These are basically my internal functions, really just metadata updated. Royal Protector sent over some formatting fixes for the item descriptions. So I incorporated those. And another one where we basically had a combat ability which should have been under equipped. So I incorporated that. And then just this morning, I did another library updates. I mean, these library updates are literally they're usually just metadata like this. In this case, there were a few, I had a little bit of functionality, but it really doesn't matter all that much. These are very, very routine because of how I have everything linked locally. So that's pretty much all I have done since the beta that we released back in. It was Halloween, yeah, back at the end of October, because that was for the community challenge. So just some very, very minor updates. I've not put out any more releases. It's still sitting at beta 1. So I've gotten I've gotten 2 bug reports and kind of a feature request. So I thought we'd go through those today. One is very simple. Let me pull up the item pack here. So for the vampiric dart, so let's go ahead and I don't have this installed yet. Okay, hold on a sec. Let me go to treat testing. Now I've set up a special I copied a brand new BG2 EE directory because one of the bug reports was compatibility. So I basically set up a new directory with just the mods where there are conflicts. So, all right, really quick. Let's go ahead and install the community item pack. So, set up. I'm not going to go. This is the very, very fast way to install this. So language 0 basically so it doesn't prompt you for language, and then the -- yes just basically says install everything. So it's only one component, but if you just put yes, then I don't have to answer yes or no to any of the components. That's my shortcut for doing stuff. So it's installed. So let's take a quick look at the Vampiric Dart. Now it's installed. I need to go to the compat. There it is. Okay. And the Vampiric Dart is G3C Vamp. We're thinking about it. Vampiric Dart. All right. So Mars, whose item this was, had mentioned that. So this is a dart that when it hits somebody, it has a chance to drain hit points. And so he wanted there to be a message like combat feedback that will let you know when you have drained health. So we're just going to add a small little, we already have the item drain. We already have the drain here. So we're just going to add one more effect that has the, that just basically displays a string. So we're just going to copy this. We're going to paste it in as a new effect so that we preserve everything else. Not damage. We want to do display string, which is 139. For now, we're going to leave the string blank because it's text that we're adding to the game. We're going to have to do that through whido. So whatever value is here really doesn't matter right now. It's unused, but let's go ahead and 0 it. Because it's display string, you always use instant permanent timing mode because even if you use like a duration, it's still only going to display once. So instant permanent, no duration, same probabilities as the actual HP drain. These, we copied this from damage, so this was the 1d4 damage. Excuse me. This is the 1d4 damage that the drain was doing. But on a display string, these become the maximum and minimum level, so we want to 0 both of these, because then otherwise it would only display for creatures within those levels, which we don't want. There's no save, and the special field means nothing on this. So we are going to save the dart. And then we need to do one thing in the install, because we need to populate this display string field. So what we need to do is first we need to add the string to our tray file. This is going to be a game string. What strings does it already use? It uses 1040. Well, actually, it's not going to matter because I need the first available string. All right. So we're just going to add 1070. And we're just going to do hit points drained. Okay. So now we have the string. We're going to come here and let's see. Okay. We are going to alter that effect. There's only one. Actually, let me verify that there's only one opcode 139 because there might be one on the other headers. No, that just casts spells. Okay. There's only one opcode 139, so I can use that as a specification. And then we need to set parameter 1 to this new string. So we want to, and this needs to be, we're going to match opcode 1. We're going to match opcode 139, and we're going to set parameter 1 as, now because we're adding a new, parameter 1 only takes string values. And since we're adding some from a tray, we need to do the I don't know if we remember this, but this is the resolve string ref trick, where it's basically going to look up if this string is in the game, and if it's not, it's going to add it. So this is either going to return the existing string ref that is there, or it's going to create a new one and then use that. So, oh, and this is parameter, not. Okay. That should do it. Make sure these are all saved. We're going to reinstall. Oh, it's giving me a warning because opcode 139 is there, because I did not. In fact, I just undid my work, didn't I? Oh, that was dumb. Okay. I forgot to copy this back into the mod folder. So we have to do this again. So really quickly. This needs to be 139. No text, make this 0. Clear these. Okay. Let's save it. And then let's also export it back to here. So that's now there. Okay, now let's try reinstalling. And we shouldn't get a warning this time. There we go. All right, refresh the tree really quick. Let's come back in here to G3C vamp. And if we did that right, we should now have this display string, hit points drained. Nice and easy. All right, so that was one feature request from Mars. So that's easy enough. That is done. Let us go ahead and, while we're here, go ahead and make that commit. And feedback to HP drain of vampire dart. Okay. Yep. Change that. Yep. Okay. Commit and push. Okay. Done. So that was the first thing. I got a report from is Zinblock send me? Oh, I better make sure I have those. Sorry, Zinblock. Let me double check that that I have those. I might have to wait to the break because I suspect I'm gonna have to go into Discord to find those. But give me a sec. I will get to those in a moment. I got a report from Artisan who said that the Realm Shaper's brush wasn't working because he said there was a spell missing. So this is one of those things where we have a very, very nice tool within Near Infinity. And so basically, like, if the Realm Shaper brush is saying, hey, I need you to cast a spell, but then the spell reference is wrong, it will basically say it as a it'll turn up as a missing resource. And the nice thing is Near Infinity has excellent tools to do that. So we're going to go ahead and the mod is installed right now, so we can go tools. We're going to check for illegal resource refs. So this basically means like if I'm supposed to be casting like, a spell named Foo, but it's misspelled or it's not present, this will flag it. So we're going to run this. Pretty much this is we're going to limit this to items, creatures. What else have we added? We're going to check Fs. We're going to check spells. Yeah, because pretty much, and stores. Because pretty much like we don't modify anything else here. Well, I guess we can check dialogue too. Now, the thing is, this will check everything. So this is going to check all creatures in the game, not just what we've added by mods. But the good news is, because we use a prefix, we can just look for anything that is, everything in this mod uses the G3 prefix. So if there's anything missing, and here we go, right? These are referring to various things that are not present. So is it that we have those and are not copying them over is probably the most likely thing. So let's look. All right. So it's saying, let's see. I'm sorry. Let me go back to this really quick. It's saying that the G3 brush B3F is missing. Does that file actually exist? It does not exist. Oh, and this could also be where I think this. Oh, okay. I suspect that we had a 3 spell at one point, and then we removed it. Okay. So we do have missing resources. Yeah, because all these things are referring to 3. And then crest D. See, I was hoping this was going to be something where it's just... We do have crest D. Is this a typo in the... I don't think... Oh, you know what? I think we're not copying this over. Let's see. Oh, sorry. I should bring that over here so you can see what I'm doing. It's not here. We have C. All right. So, yeah, we're not copying the D spell. So let's bring this... So that one at least is an easy fix. What else is missing? Crest D. Yeah, these are all going to the same reference. So near infinity, because these fields can remove effects by resource, can refer to items or spells. Sometimes when near infinity is reporting an error, in this case, it's saying it's missing this item, but what it's really missing is the spell. So adding that spell copy will fix that issue. The Realm Shaper's brush, again, is missing this B3, which I suspect is once again going to be, these are actually spells. And I think, yeah, if these are all just, it's removing a spell that doesn't exist. It's removing a spell that doesn't exist. I think at one time we had a 3 and then we turned out we didn't need it. So if these are all just 321s, I'm pretty sure we can just delete all these 321s. Because if B3 doesn't exist and never gets set, okay, we do have a melee hit effect. So, all right. So it should exist. We should have an F for it. We do not. Is this something we generate from other Fs? Here's all of our Realm Shaper brush. We copy spells. Copy more spells. Copy more spells. All right. I'm going to have to look into this because this one at least is the Cloak of Soundrest is at least easy to fix. But the Realm Shaper's brush, as I recall, by itself was, let's just say, complicated. Let's just say it was complicated. So it's probably going to take me 20 minutes just to remember how I set it up and look at it. So I'm actually going to fix that one offline. This one at least is fixed. Let's reinstall and verify that, doing that didn't cause some problems that prevents install. It didn't. So let's make, let's go ahead and make a quick commit for that at least. All right, we're gonna, and this is a fix for missing. What was that name of that? Here, I'm just gonna copy that. So we had it. It just wasn't. We didn't copy it over. So we're gonna commit and push. Boom, boom, boom. That's done. And then Zinblack was saying that he had sent this over as a pull request. So yes, Zinblack sent over fixed BAMs. I missed this in the update log. So these are here. They were already merged in. So we already have these. So that's good. I missed that when I was going through the history. I apologize for that. But yes, these were merged in. Zenblack's fixed BAMs are already in. So good. I'm glad I didn't miss that. Especially if it was a pull request, I definitely should not have missed it. So those are fixed. All right, so I'm gonna have to circle back to those missing resources for the Realm Shaper's Brush. I'm gonna do that offline because again, that item is complicated, and I need to refresh my memory what the heck B3 is supposed to be doing because it's complicated. So the last thing I had was Morpheus had mentioned that the item pack and his Forgotten Armaments and his Tactics Remix were trying to add items to the same item slots on creatures. So I went ahead before the stream. The reason why I have this compatibility directory is basically I installed Forgotten Armaments and I installed Tactics Remix to see where we have conflict. So the good news is there's really only one conflict. So these are my notes from earlier. So we add the Battle Blade to Zelenora, which is Mage 18Z. We add a little bit of combat scripting so that she uses it. Tactics Remix that doesn't mess with the ring slots. It does overwrite the script, but Tactics Remix is going to have her doing something far more useful than using that item, so it doesn't matter. So there's no conflict there. We had two other items, two places where neither Forgotten Armaments or Tactics Remix touch, so these are also fine. GP Mage. Now, we both add weapons to GP Mage. In fact, we add, let me pull up ours. We add, okay. This is where we add the Vampiric Dart. So let me pull up GP Mage so we can talk about this a little bit more clearly, and I'll explain why there's not actually a conflict. So if we look at GP Mage, all right, GP Mage by default. Here, let me. First of all, Argent added this feature, and I effing love it because this is something I use so often. I can right click and I can open the Biffed resources. So this is basically GP Mage in the game as shipped. So this is like what GP Mage looks like without any mods on it. So without any mods, she just has a generic quarterstaff. That's the only weapon she has. So with Forgotten Armaments, he changes that to, is it tactic? Well, one of those two mods basically gives her a new staff. And you can see we've installed it and it does not conflict. And I'm going to explain why here really quickly, because he does it by replacing the item specifically in the weapon 1 slot. So if they're selling in the weapon 1 slot, in this case their staff of 1, it will basically overwrite it with his new item. This second line about the armor doesn't matter because we're not adding armor. So, but he's adding Remembrance plus 3 as the weapon 1, and it's basically replacing staff of 1. Now we are adding an item, which means it's going to look for an open slot rather than just, overwrite whatever's there. But we've left it open instead of specifying like weapon 1, weapon 2, weapon 3. We've basically said weapon. So in our case, it will happily drop it in any of these 4 spots. It does not care, right? Whatever is open, it's going to put it there. So without Forgotten Armaments, it's going to be staff 1 and this. If it has been replaced, then it's still going to replace it. Now, the normal order is first it's going to be the community item pack. So it would be like you install the item pack and you're going to have Staff 01 and the Vampiric. And then Forgotten Armament is going to come along and it's still only just going to replace Weapon 1. So it's not going to conflict no matter what the install order is. So we're both adding weapons, but we're both doing it in a way that they're not conflicting. So GP Mage is fine. So this is one of the cases where both were coded well, so there's no conflict. The one place we do have the actual conflict is on Keta, which is the thief that's at the guarded compound in the temple district. So Forgotten Armaments adds a cloak, and then Tactics Remix adds a belt. Now, unfortunately, we're adding a belt to Keta. And if the belt slot isn't open, we try the cloak slot. So essentially, the two places where we want to add are essentially already taken. So what I'm going to do is basically, if either of these mods are installed, instead of giving Keta this belt, I'm just going to drop it into our merchant store. And then I'm also going to provide code to Morpheus so that if it detects the item pack, then it can also move the belt to the store for us. So one of the things you want to do when you're doing compatibility is your focus should be on the order in which things should be installed, but you also need to account for the fact that players don't listen. And even though the item pack should never be installed after, it's an item pack, it should go early in the install order. Tactics Remix should not. But there are still going to be people who are going to install the item pack after Tactics Remix, despite the fact that everybody's going to tell them not to. So you always want your fix to go both ways. So we can fix it on our end, and then I'm going to send Morpheus when the stream's over. I'm going to stream a little code snippet so that he can detect the item pack on his end and work around it. So, but for right now, first let's focus on our end. So this Keta change is now going to be conditional. So this is now going to be bracketed off by an action if, and we're only going to add the item to Keta if not mod is installed. Here it is. Forgotten armament. Basically 20. So these were basically taken from the Waidu log. The only bit you need is the name of the TP2. You don't need it. Doesn't matter if it's in the top folder or down a folder. This is when you do mod is installed. This is the only bit that you need. So we want to do action if not is the mod installed, this mod, and then you need the component number, which in this case is 20. The 0 is the language. If you look at a Waidu log, it'll have like the mod name and then 2 numbers. The first number is always the selected language. The second one is the actual component number. So in this case, we want the component number. So it needs to be if that is not installed, and also that, let me just duplicate this line, and also the Tactic Remix component 11 is also not installed. All right, and we want to do proper parentheses. All right, and just because I like being anal retentive, there we go. And then we need to close the end. And else begin. All right. So at this point, have I... Excellent. The store has been installed at this point. Yes. Because we're going to modify the store. I'm just verifying really quick that the store has been installed prior. Okay. Idea set its artwork. Why don't I just be smart about this and just look for the store? Okay. Oh, crap, it's after. Shoot. Okay. Well, I was hoping we could do this in one clause, but instead we're going to have to do this. All right. So action if. All right. So basically, if these are not installed, only if both of them, because we're doing an and, only if both of these are not installed, give him this item. Now, if either one of those are installed, when we do the store, we need to do another check like this. That's what we're going to do. And then this, because we're in a patch, this needs to be a patch if instead of action if. Let's bring this up, bring this in. So And in this case, we want the opposite condition, right? If either of these are installed, so this is now an or, and these are now positive checks. So if either one of these are installed, then we're going to do the same as up here, right? We're going to do an add store item X command for the black, get back here, for the Black Dragon belt. So the item name, what was that? G3C, the Black Dragon belt. And let's take a quick look at the store because we want to figure out the order. Right? We need to figure out the natural position where this would be in the store. So let's bring up the store really quick. This is going to be G3C merch. G3C merch. And we can see we got darts, items. This is a belt, so it probably needs to be. Do we have any other belts in here? We do not. We've got cloaks. We've got. Oh, we do have another belt in here. Oh, perfect. All right, then we're going to put it after this other belt. We're going to put it after G3 curd. So we're going to place it after G3 curd. And then we need to end that patch statement. And yeah, because this is not an enhanced edition only item, is it? It is not. Okay. So if we look at Keta right now, because right now this is what it would look like if you installed item pack after these two mods. So you'll notice that it's basically pushed the Girdle of Hill Giant Strength out of the slot because we asked it to look in belt. We asked it to look at cloak. Where's the cloak? There it is. Both of those spots are now filled. And so what it does in those circumstances is it says, all right, I've been told to add this item. So it doesn't find an open slot. So it goes back to the first slot that you specified and it places it there. And what was there, it pushes out. Now, if we used replace, it would just overwrite this. But as it is, like right now, you're going to have Keta dropping 2 belts, which is obviously suboptimal. So now that we've done that compatibility fix, we should see, let's just reinstall it. We should see now that the belt is no longer here. Keta retains his belt of Hill Giant Strength, and we should now see the Black Dragon belt in the store, assuming we've done everything correctly. So there we go. Let's refresh the tree. Let's first check Keta. He retains his Hill Giant Strength. The Black Dragon belt is nowhere to be seen. Let us double check the store that the item has been added and in the place that we want. Ta-da, there's the curd. There's the Black Dragon belt. So just like we wanted, we are good to go. So Zen Black was asking, how would you find the conflict of that? So this was, in this case, I just brute forced it because the item pack only adds 5 items in the wild. I basically only had 5 creatures that I needed to check. So what I did was, I just basically did like for Keta, right? I did Waydo and I did a change log. Change dash log to see who was messing with Keta. Right, and I'll tell you, here's everything that is touching Keta. All right, Forgotten Armament, component 20, Tactics Remixed, components 11, 46, and 40. So this lets me know these are all the components and mods. And before we change that, Community Item Pack also would have showed up here, but now we're no longer modifying Keta. So this basically gave me a list of like what to look through. And then after that, it was just a matter of if it's something I'm familiar with, like I can go directly, like if it's something like Tweaks Anthology, I can go directly into the component and go, all right, I know where it is. I know what I'm looking for. But because I don't know these mods. Essentially what I did is I just went into, like, for example, Forgotten Armament. I just went into its mod folder. I said, all right, give me every TP file. So that's TP2s, that's TPAs, that's TPH. These are your main files that are going to have code. And I literally just said, all right, give me all of these. And open all of these. All of these files are now open in Notepad. And then I just said, all right, find me everywhere. Oh, and this is, and show me everywhere where HL Keta turns up. All right, so we have mine from the community item pack. And then I look over here and say, oh, here we go. Here's HL Keta. And Keta has 2 copies. That's his downstairs version. That's his upstairs version. So I said, oh, okay, here we go. This is very clearly where the conflict is. He's adding items to the cloak. And then I also did the same for Tactics Rubix. I said, oh, they're adding something to the belt slot. So both of our potential homes for that belt are gone. So finding conflicts is not, there's no straightforward way of just do this, right? I mean, it always depends on what specifically the conflict is. And this is probably a good point to talk about mod conflicts just kind of generally. We put a high premium on making sure kind of everything works together, because players want to install 8,000 things. And the problem is we're victims of our own success. We've gotten so good at making things work well together. They expect everything to work well together. And that's a good expectation. And that's one that we should try to live up to. But there are times, a very easy example of this is there are going to be times when modders are trying to do the same thing or have different takes on the same idea. And just quite simply, they can't be resolved. For example, Tweak's Anthology, because it was originally in the East of Use, still has Wes Weimer's Shapeshifter Rebalancing. Now, David liked the idea of kind of like the Shapeshifter pause being their own items instead of an ability, but then he has a much more nuanced and well-balanced version of a Shapeshifter Rebalancing in Sword Coast Stratagems. Artisan also has his own version of a Shapeshifter Rebalancing in, I believe it's his House Rules mod. So there's no way that you're going to be able to get 2 of those to work together, much less 3. So that's one of the times you just go, all right, these mods are just simply 3 different takes on the same concept. We cannot resolve them. And so your best thing to do then is just basically be like for Tweak's Anthology, if it finds that like David's Shapeshifter Rebalancing is installed, it'll just say you can't install this and it'll skip the component. There are times when that's just simply the answer, right? These 2 mods do not work together. What's the relationship? They have irreconcilable differences. And that's not a bad thing, right? I mean, having more takes on a concept is always good for players because, it gives them more choice, right? And sometimes you just can't resolve that, right? Divine Remix did domains. I think Deities of Faerun does domains. I know Talents of Faerun does domains. I think Faith and Powers also does domains. So only one of those domain systems is going to work, right? So that's another idea where it's just like, all right, well, we all have slightly different takes on the same idea, and you're going to have, as a player, you're going to have to pick one. There are other times when, like for here example, right? Forgotten Armaments is generally adding a bunch of items. G3, the item pack is also adding items, a smaller number, but it's basically the same idea. We're adding items to other games. The Calling also adds items through the exotic item pack that used to be parts of an anthology. And in that case, it's just a matter of, like here, it's like, for me, it's not critical that the Black Dragon belt is on Keta. I thought that was a good place for it, but I'm not married to it. So in this case, I don't mind just being like, all right, Morpheus wants those items, he can have them. It takes a little bit of flexibility, And the other thing too is also keep in mind that just because you're first, it's not like you have an exclusive right. Like the Calling forever has added the exotic item pack. Used to be part of Tweaks, is now I farmed it out to the Calling because it's a more natural install order there. But like for ages, the one usable katana it gives you for most of the game is on the crazy swordsman at the Firewine Bridge, right? The guy who's like, I'm the greatest swordsman on the Sword Coast. So it's like, all right, that idiot sounds like a good candidate for a katana. So spoiler, the mod adds 3 katanas. He's got an unenchanted one. There's a cursed +2 one somewhere in the mountains. And then the only magical katana you get is like right before you meet Saravok. And that was by design, right? I wanted you to they're supposed to be rare, and I made them rare. But I'm getting off track. So exotic items pack has given, I think his name is Millium, or it's either Millium or Mellum, has given him a katana like for 2 decades. But that doesn't mean that like nobody else can add a weapon to him, right? That's nonsense, right? If David thinks that he should be more of a challenge and wants to give him, a +3 longsword, then by all means, right? I'm not married to the idea, right? And you shouldn't need to be like, I need to check every mod out there and make sure nobody has modified this. I mean, first of all, it's impossible, right? Nobody can keep up with all the mods that are going on. That's one of the reasons why often your first release it should be a beta, because you're going to have conflicts, and they're going to be conflicts that you probably never thought about and didn't even, or for a mod you've never heard of. So that's something to keep in mind, right? Your first release, always at least put out a testing release, and then don't be like, just play with my mod, because I don't want to, it gets complicated because I don't know if a bug is mine or something else. But absolutely put it out there and tell players to play it with other stuff, because conflicts are going to happen, right? And each one is different, right? There's no pat answer about like, here's how you resolve conflicts. It's like, again, it could be something like Shapeshifter Rebalancing, where it's like, these are just not going to work together. They're never going to work together, and you just need to pick one. Or there could be something minor like this, where it's like, okay, we're both trying to add a belt to the same creature. All right. Easy enough to fix, right? The other option too is Morpheus overriding the belt is also fine, right? It doesn't matter all that much to me. So I'll just move it to the store. Easy enough. If it's something that like where it's critical for a mod to work, then it gets a little trickier. It's like, okay, right, I really need, like let's say instead of this just being an item pack, let's say this is a quest mod, and that Keta having that belt is critical to my new NPC's quest, right? We need to get that belt, and then something needs to be done with that belt, or that belt's somebody's special item or whatever. Then it becomes a little more complicated, and that's where just you have give and take, right? You have to be like, well, this is really important. A good example of this is Tweaks the Anthology has had an identify all items component forever. I mean, that was originally part of ease of use, and we got that when we ate ease of use, and it became part of Tweaks Anthology. However, Vlad contacted me because Shadows over Subar has an entire quest that revolves around finding an item that you cannot identify, and you need to go on a quest to basically identify it. So that's easy, right? It's like, okay, it's critical that this item remains unidentified. So there's basically a carve out, right? If you go look at that component right now in Anthology, it's like, okay, everything gets identified except for that. Like there's like one item, right? So it's also, so it just, what I'm trying to get at is it just requires flexibility, and nothing is ever, there's no answer that's going to that's going to fit in all occasions. And it just requires being open-minded, understanding scope and importance, right? If it's, if it's something that's like, this is critical for my mod, it's like, okay, well then I'll work around what you're doing. The other thing that's also really important is from a practical standpoint, the burden of compatibility fixes usually goes on the mods going after, because in general, I can't do anything about mods that go after mine. So for example, right, I'm at both ends of the spectrum, right? Because when I'm working on something like a fix back, right, whether I'm talking BG2 fix back, Icewind Dale fix back, or the E fix back, if we do something that causes a mod conflict, the other mod pretty much has to solve that on their end, because those fix backs are first in the order, right? With the exception of DLC merger, right? Those are first in the order. So it's like, I can't detect your mod because it shouldn't be installed at that point. Those are by definition the first in mods. So that's why, for example, with E Fixpack, we're really slow rolling it because, like, for example, we've already had a conflict with Ascension. There were a few other minor changes here and there. Like EET was something else that we had to go into EET and change so that it works with the Fixback. Ascension, we've already made some changes. We just got some bug reports, so it's going to need some more changes to deal with EU Fixback. And then on the other end, you have Tweaks Anthology, which is last in the install order. So basically, it is riddled with compatibility code, right? Like, the Shadows of Subar item is like one example, but also, it needs to account for this and it needs to account for that. Good example. One that I recently did. Bragar is an NPC mod who is a dwarf that uses axes, and at one point he's one-handed, right? So that has obvious conflicts with Tweak's two-handed axes component. Because basically how Bragar does it is, when he's installed, he looks through all axes in the game, and if they're two-handed, or any two-handed weapon, basically makes him use like an opcode 180 to basically say, I can't use this. And then Anthology comes along afterwards and adds a bunch of two-handed weapons, either through two-handed axes, two-handed katanas, or two-handed bastard swords, right? And so these are all items that Bragar should not be able to use. So Anthology actually goes into Bragar's code, into Bragar's items, and basically all the new two-handed weapons we've just added, we go into Bragar and add all those new items there, so Bragar can't use the new two-handed items we just added. So, right, and that's, like, the hand thing is a critical aspect of Bragar's character. So it's like, we need to fix that. It's silly if Bragar can use a two-handed axe when he has a hand. So there's, like I said, it's flexibility, it's communication, and then also just sometimes patience, right? I mean, not everybody's doing this full time. So, like this, I feel bad because this was reported me back like in November, and I'm just now getting to it just because we've been busy with other stuff. And same thing with E Fixback. We put that out, and then we didn't have an answer for EET or Ascension for a while. So just patience, communications, keeping an open mind, getting an idea of the scope, recognizing there are going to be times when you can't, where something is compatible, and you need to just, accept that. And in those cases, your only workaround is to just exclude those two components, right? If you detect the other one, don't install yours. And then make sure that's reciprocal, right? If yours is installed, make sure the other person doesn't install theirs. So, and the other thing too is also, there's also components could also be shared across mods. Like it's well known that Icewind and SES basically use the same library to do Icewind Dale spells. So those two, it's like they'll detect each other and skip, but it's because it's essentially already been done. So there's conflicts are just it's very rare that two of them are the same. And so you just need to make sure that you listen to player reports, and more than anything, I don't want your response to be like, "Oh, there's an incompatibility with this mod. Don't install it with mine." Like that's there are going to be times where that is going to be the answer, but at least look and investigate and try to resolve it if you can, because first of all, players are going to do what players are going to do, and that's going to be like, "Hey, I found 800 mods. I installed them all together in the order that I found them." And you're just going to be like, "Okay." If you can minimize the player and the pain of players, it will minimize your pain when they come to you and say, "Hey, nothing is working." It's like, well, yes, you installed Tweaks Anthology first, and then you installed the eFix pack, and then you installed DLC Merger. Yes, that is not how you do it, but you can only handhold so you can only hold hands so much. So, um, I that's kind of compatibility. Like I said, I'm gonna put together that code, and basically on Morpheus' side, it's just gonna be essentially the same thing, just in reverse. We're gonna be like, okay, because he's using replace. If if the item pack is installed first, it's just gonna overwrite the Dragon Belt. So it's essentially gonna delete the Black Dragon Belt from Keta. But I'm gonna ask him that compatibility code. So if the item pack is detected, then he will basically add. Sorry, I gotta scroll all the way back to mine. I'm essentially gonna want him to do this in both of these mods. So it's really easy, just a little code snippet. The other thing I could do is I could even put this in a little library that he could call from his mod to make it even easier. So, but that'll be easy enough. I'll handle that offline. So, but the main thing is, at least from our end, we've resolved the incompatibility, and now it's just touching base about like, okay, now to resolve the incompatibility on your end, here's what we do. So, and like I said, it's just more than anything, it's just communication and thoughtfulness and understanding scope, and like a lot of stuff with modding, it's more of an art than it is a science. So just be open-minded about it, and ask, right? If you're having a conflict with another mod and you don't know how to resolve it, ask, right? I mean, there's all sorts of people in the community that can help with stuff like this and can give you ideas, and maybe even ideas where you can resolve it where nothing has to change. So just like I said, just keep an open mind. So excuse me. Sorry, my allergies are going crazy today, so I'm a little coffee and sneezy. So we're about an hour in. I think this is a good spot. Let's go ahead and take a break here, and then we're going to come back. And my plan was to cover a couple of topics. Let me bring this up. So just a preview of what we're going to do after the break. So my idea was that we're going to add another item to the item pack. And the reason why I want to do that is there have been a couple of things that have been requested. One is doing item BAMs, or just BAM, or just explaining or talking about BAMs in general. So that's going to be one. Two is somebody asked about an upgradable item. And then we also talked about projectiles. So my idea is that we're going to add a throwing spear to the item pack. And we're going to touch, and because it's throwing, we're going to touch on projectiles. Because it's a new item, we're going to do a BAM for it. And then let's also make it upgradable, either by Sesminar or Cromwell or both. And we'll tackle all those with one item. Now, because we're already an hour in, I don't know how far we're going to get into that, but we can at least start today. So, but we'll start that after the break. So we'll be back in a couple minutes, and then we'll go from there. All right, we're back. Incrementus, at least on my mixer, the the microphone's already at maximum, so I'm not sure if there's anything else I can do to increase volume. I'm really sorry about that. I'll try to move the mic a little closer. One of the problems is because I'm constantly looking back and forth the screens. I've bumped the mic more than a few times, so this is probably about as close as I want to get, but until you start hearing my beard scratch on it. So I apologize. The other thing too is also my throat's a little sore, so I am talking a little softer than normal. So I apologize if it's hard for you to hear, but this is, as far as I can tell, I've got my mic gain maxed, so I don't think I can boost that any more than I already do. But I'll try to be mindful of that and try to be a little bit louder. So all right, so the spear. All right, I previewed this before the break. So this is kind of my basic idea. All right, it's gonna be a one-handed spear. Much like, say, the Firetooth Dagger, it's going to have a melee and a ranged ability. Because I'd like it, I'm imagining it's a one-handed spear that we're going to designate as a javelin. Now, the good news is I've already checked. The existing spear animations work one-handed, and they work with a shield, so we're fine on all of those counts. I also know that the spear throwing also works because item upgrade has had throwing spears like forever. So it has 3 different throwing spears in that mod. So I know it works and we're good to go there. So it's a one-hand spear with a melee and range ability, with the caveat that I do want the melee ability to be slightly weaker than the ranged, because I do want this to be primarily a throwing weapon. I want the melee to be weaker than the range. You guys can really see my awful typing ability. Because we want this to be an upgradable weapon, let's start it as a +3 that's going to upgrade to a +4. Either through Cromwell or Sespenar. We can talk about that. I don't really have a plan for that quite yet. One-handed spear. And then for throwing weapons, we have a Crimson Dart and we have Azure Edge. So we have red and blue covered. So your natural is to go for the third primary and do something in yellow, but let's do green. We'll make this like the Evergreen Javelin. So instead of just being a straight +3, I want it to be something with an Evergreen Javelin. We want to have this to have maybe some sort of green focused ability, right? It could be poison, it could be an entangled, it could be, I'm obviously spitballing here, so if you guys have ideas in chat, by all means, because this is obviously not set in stone. And the idea being that it will have some on-hit effect, that when it gets upgraded, not only will it get the enchantment bump from +3 to +4, but the ability will either fire more often or be more powerful. So that's kind of where I'm thinking with this. And then at least for the BAM, because one of the reasons why we're doing this is I want to talk about BAMs, is that we are going to, we're just going to take an existing BAM, recolor it, and then show you how to do a BAM from basically, from pings. So that's the basic idea. So for now, at least, let's just make the basic weapon, and then we're going to talk about projectiles. We're going to talk about BAMs, and then I think we may or may not get to the upgrade, which will probably be good because that'll give me a chance to think about it. What exactly we want to do. Oh, the ranged ability. Obviously, this is going to be a return to the thrower type of weapon. All right, this isn't going to be like a stack of +3 javelins. It's limited. So that's the concept, at least. So let's go ahead and let's make the item, and then we can start doing all the stuff that comes along with it. So I also don't have Well, I've got an idea from the name. I don't have like flavor text. So if anybody wants to contribute that or an idea for the on hit ability, by all means, toss it in chat or toss it in thread if you have a brainstorm like after the stream. This is obviously not something that needs to be decided right now. So first, let's go ahead and make the spear. So let's pop down to. We should just have a generic spear +3 that we can use as a base. Spear +3. Here we go. We're going to add a copy of. This is going to be G3C ever G. All right, 6, 7, 8. Yep, that'll be our item. Oh, did I miscount? G3C. There we go. Okay. I must have had a typo the first time. All right. So what critical effect? Oh, because this is, oh shoot. Okay. Actually, hold on. Let me delete this because I'm doing this off a modded game, so it's picking up something that Texas Remix has added to that. So let me. All right, we're going to uninstall the item pack. We're going to uninstall tactics. Okay. Shoot, I should have thought about this during the break and done that then. Oh, or I should just go to my clean install. Yeah, we're just doing the heavy lifting already. We'll wait. Okay. There we go. All right. Let's duplicate that sphere. Okay, spear. We want the +3. Let's add a copy of again. G3C ever G.item. Okay, there we go. Yeah, now we don't have any random effects on it. So we'll adjust all this in a moment. Okay, we want it to be one-handed. Spear. Proficiencies. Nothing should change here. Okay. Now we're going to copy this. We're going to copy this ability, except the second. Let's make the primary ranged. Primary ability is going to be ranged. We're going to make the range visual. So we want it to be a 30-foot. It's a weapon ranged. And all right, so like I said, I want the throwing damage to be slightly more than the melee damage with this. And the problem is spear melee damage already sucks, but this does help in that it is a one-handed weapon. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the range damage at 1d6, and I think let's change the melee damage. Oh god, 1d4 is terrible. But to be fair, if you're in hand-to-hand combat with a javelin, probably that would put it down at like dagger damage, which doesn't seem unreasonable. Yeah, we'll do 1d4 for the melee. I know that kind of sucks, but the other type is this damage is now missile damage. We'll get to the projectile in a moment because it does need a projectile for this. And then make sure the melee. Okay, yeah, the melee we want to change to 1d4 plus 3. I guess the other thing too, we could also do 1d6. Like if range is 1d6 plus 3, we could do 1d6 plus 2. But I guess mathematically the average works out to the same by reducing the dice size by 2. So, all right, we'll just do 1d4. Oh, and then the what do throwing axes do? I think they do. What does Azure Edge do on its throwing? It does strength damage, right? Damage strength. So you use this flag too. Okay. So we'll do the same for our spear then. Not strength bonus, but the damage strength bonus. I think this is also different on original. I think it's flag 0, and I think on EEs it's flag 2. So all right. So that's our basic spear, just like that. We are going to change these references, even though we don't have the icons yet. We're going to keep the ground spear because there's only one ground spear icon. What we're going to do for the artwork is we're just going to recolor the existing BAM. So we're just going to take this and basically make it a different color. So that means that this artwork should still be relevant. But we're going to change this. This is going to be G3C ever I.bam. All right. Proficiency spear, like I said, usabilities are all fine. We've made it one-handed. It's a 3 enchantment. Weapon speeds are fine. Change the range. Oh, I need to change the icon here too. This is going to be the same as the new icon, G3 ever I. All right, let's reset the field type and then copy it. All right, change it here too because we don't want to use the spear plus 3 artwork. And and because it's now one-handed weapon, the range should be 1, not 2. Range of 2 is generally exclusively for two-hand weapons. One-hand weapons, I think daggers have 0, and I think everything else has a range of 1. So, being as this is supposed to be a short one-handed spear, reducing its range to 1 is appropriate. Otherwise, everything else looks good. Oh, this has still got the... One of the things I absolutely hate about spear animations is if you look at this, this is obviously something I adjust in Tweaks Anthology, but look at this. Look at this mix of attacks. You've got a spear. One end of it is pointy and metal. Right? You're not going to be swinging 2/3 of the time. Right? You should be trying to poke, let's say, 70% of the time, and then let's split the other ones like 20 and 10. I think this is the default. Some spears are 100% thrusting attacks, which is also nonsense. If you look at martial artists using spears, yes, they do spin it around and hit it with you like it's a staff. So you want at least some swings, but for the most part, you generally want to use the pokey bit. So I hate that these animations are so bad for spears. For the throwing, it doesn't really matter so much because none of these animations matter because it's not melee. So we can just leave those. The projectile is going to be set dynamically, so we don't need to worry about that right now. The name and the identified description, the identified name are both going to be set dynamically when we do the install. I think 5 strength is reasonable for a one-handed spear, right? And that puts it on par with, I think, a short sword. I think short swords are 5. So I'm fine with that minimum strength. Otherwise, I think everything else here looks good. Oh, the colors, yes. So like I said, we want this to be a green. So instead of taupe being a major color, let's make it something a little more green. Something like a dark green. Ooh, a dusky green. There we go. So that's one color, and then the other color. This is the head. Oh, this one's already avocado, but we can do better than that. That's not a light, dirty yellow. That's a green. Come on now. You can see this is, we'll do a light metallic green. Okay. So there we go. We've set our colors. All right. So this is the very bare bones. This is the item. So let's go ahead and export this back to the actual item folder. Okay. Let's go ahead and write a quick name and description for it. Let me open up the tray file again. We need a name and description. This is going to be the 71, the Evergreen Javelin, and 72 will be the identified descript. It's like green and stuff. Obviously, this is a placeholder. Let's grab a description. We'll start with the existing spear animate or spear description. Damage, and let's see how Azure Edge does its description, because it's going to be a lot of things. Okay, here we go. It has a damage. Oh, but the damage is going to be different, so we do need. Is there any weapon that is different? What does Firetooth? Firetooth does the same for both, doesn't it? Shoot. We may not have precedent for this. We do not. All right, so we're probably going to need both. So we definitely need combat abilities because it's going to return to the wielder's hand when thrown. So we need that bit. That goes right after statistics. Boom. And we're going to grab, it does its section like this. So we're going to use this as the template. So we're going to say, and we do melee first. All right, so 1d4 plus 3 melee. And then 1d6 plus 3 thrown. I feel like we should just combine those lines. Yeah, let's do this. Melee, comma piercing, thrown, comma missile. Because we don't really have a precedent for this. Speed factor still 3. Proficiency type of spear. It's a one-handed. Is that capitalized? Yes, one-handed. Does still require 5 strength. And then also, on the original, we'll need to add in the unused abilities. Oh, and then I need a closing tilde, of course. Okay. So 1072 in the original. Let's jump back to OBG2 really quick and see how it does these descriptions. This is just, like, I love the fact that the talk team did an amazing job standardized descriptions, and they're wonderful, and I love them. The one moment that I hate them is when I'm doing an item that crosses both games, because just the formatting is different and it's just a little extra hassle. So Azure Edge does combat ability. It does it as a special under the damage type. Okay. So on this one, we don't have. So for the originals, we don't have that, but we have a special here. Actually, let's go back to just the generic Spiro 3, since that's what this was based on. Let's just recopy the section and kind of start over. So let's start over just from stats. All right, that's what I should have done. Okay. Except that we're going to do this for the damage and then the special. So we're going to do this, replace that and that and that. One-handed, not usable by cleric, mages, and thieves. The weight is 3, the speed factor is 3. We may want to reduce that weight. Yeah, let's make it weight 2. I'll go back into the item and fix that. Sorry, weight 2. All right. And here it is a numeral, right? Numeral 1. Yep. All right. Let's jump back to our PG2 game where we have the item. Hello, Chaco. Hey, sweetie. You want to hop on camera? Nope, just your tail. There was Chaco. All right, so let's go back to G3C. Oh, wait, no, it's because I'm on the wrong game. Let's try this again. Is this the compat? Yeah, there it is. Okay. Too many copies of BG2E lying around. All right. So I said I'm going to change the weight 2. Okay, done. Everything else looks fine. We're going to save this. We're going to save it back to the item folder again since I made a change. Save, overwrite, okay. All right, now let's get to the business of actually installing this in the mod. So where's our item section? So spells, here's the items. All right, we're just going to grab, here we go. All right, we're going to copy G3C ever I.item. Those descriptions are 71 to 72. 72. We are going to need to alter the projectile. We'll get to that in one moment. And then we'll do the BAM. But the BAM gets copied kind of in a general copy. So I think this is it. So this is going to be the Evergreen Javelin by Cam. All right. Let's try reinstalling really quick. And we already have an error. Oh, because it's ever G, ever I is the BAM. All right, let's try that again. That's more like it. Okay, so now we should have. We should now have a name. It's now the Evergreen Javelin. It's like green and stuff. Blah, 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 blah. Yes, okay. All good. Weight is 2, weight is 2, 3 enchantment. Okay. We're good to go on all of this. So next up, let's talk projectiles. Now, the game has an existing... Come on. Actually has an existing spear projectile. Not only people notice, there actually is a throwing spear in the game. It's just not used anywhere. So there actually is a spear projectile. We're not going to use this, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. But we are going to use this as a basis for our own projectiles. So let's talk about projectiles. So I'm going to close this. No, I don't actually want to make changes. And let's go over to projectiles for a little bit. And let's talk about projectiles, because projectiles can do, right? They range from the incredibly simple to the incredibly complex, and it just depends on, right? Like the spells tend to be complex. Saying like an arrow is literally just like a bam moving in a straight line between like the person launching the arrow and the person being hit by the arrow. On the flip side, you would have something like, you got spell effects. You have the very simple. You have something like fireball, right? It's one graph. You have one graphic that is the traveling projectile, and then when it hits its target, it plays an explosion. It plays an explosion, and then it goes away. Similar to that, you have something like web or cloud kill, where you have a little blob that also goes to the center of the area effect, but then the area of effect, plays its own set of graphics and then persists for a couple of rounds, right? Ice Storm does this. Web does this. The clouds like Cloud Kill and Stinking Cloud do this. Then you also have, and those are round projectiles. You also have Cone of Cold and Burning Hands, which do cone-shaped projectiles, right? It does an arc of damage. Burning Hands is tiny. Cone of Cold is like 20 feet long and like a 60-degree arc, so it's obviously much bigger. Icewind Dale, Shout, and Great Shout also have cone-shaped projectiles. Then you have something like Wall of Moonlight, which is a literal rectangle on the ground that is a square, persistent projectile, right? These are all done through projectile files. And then you also have, there's a whole series of invisible projectiles, because if you have something that, even if it doesn't have a visual component, if you want to have an area effect that like only affects enemies, or if you want to have an area effect that only affects allies, or whatever, you can do those for projectiles. So projectiles also don't even have to be visible. You can have invisible ones to affect your change. So let's look through some very basic ones. Like I said, the very simplest ones are something like the arrow, right? It's a single target. The speed is the speed at which it travels, from the caster to the target. In this case, the person with the bow to the person they're shooting. Some of this stuff is not intuitive. Like, I couldn't tell you what most of these flags do. So, like most things, copy it from an existing projectile that's going to be close to what you're starting with. You can add sounds, right? Like, if you think about something like Fireball, it's got that kind of whoosh sound as it goes to its target. We'll look at Fireball in a second. Projectile width, extra flags. Again, the ISDP will give you breakdowns on what every single one of these mean in more detail than you could probably ask for. And then finally, down here, you have kind of, this is the meat and potatoes, right? This is where you set the actual artwork that it uses, right? This is, when you shoot an arrow, this is your generic arrow. And it's a BAM. So, and depending on your orientation, and it's mirrored, right? So this where you can see that it's probably hard to see on the stream, but that's the tail end, that's the head. And if you were shooting the other direction, it just mirrors the BAM, right? It's only got these 4 directions, and then it mirrors them for the missing half that is not here. And it does have a slight animation. Again, at the resolution of the stream, you guys probably can't see it. It's probably just like stream noise, but it does have 5 frames that it's playing through for each one of these orientations. So that's about as simple as it gets, right? It doesn't play any noise. There's no explosion. There's no area of effect. It's literally just going from A to B. And its payload is done entirely in the item file itself, right? The projectile is not doing anything special. So this is as easy as it gets. It's something like an arrow or a bolt or a throwing axe or something like that. So in fact, we can actually go look at the existing the existing spear animation. Again, single target. It's slower than an arrow. Remember, an arrow was, I think, 60. And it uses spear.bam, right? Again, it's almost identical arrow. You've got 5 frames of animation, and you've got 4 orientations. And with mirroring, that handles everything that you need. Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were asking. I'll get to that in one moment. Incrementus. Incrementus is making a suggestion for like the on-hit effect. So, okay. So let me get through projectiles really quick. So, again, right, the spear projectile is just like the arrow. It's a single target. It plays just basically like a traveling animation, and that's it, right? This is about as simple as it gets. Now let's go to something that we're probably all familiar with. Good old Fireball, right? Now you notice already Fireball has area effect info. So it's got like this whole extra, batch of information that wasn't present on the arrow or the spear because it's now an area of effect projectile. So when you designate it as an area of effect, there's a whole bunch of new information that you now have to distinguish. So you'll notice it has a sound when the fireball travels. That's the fireball whooshing towards its target. When it hits, it has an explosion sound. So now, we're getting a little more complicated. We've got sound effects added to this. Excuse me. Now, just like the single target, this band, the projectile animation, this is the animation that's used as it's traveling to the target. Same thing, you've got, 5 orientations with a couple of frames of animation just to give it a little, a little bit of flames. The light spot intensity, this basically controls how much it lights up like the ground as it travels, if I remember right. I generally don't mess with these. And I don't think there's really anything else here that's terribly interesting. Like I said, the ISDP will give you more information than you could possibly ever want about these. Generally, if I'm making a projectile, I'm usually copying it from an existing projectile and then just tweaking it here and there. So if you're doing something like from scratch that's like super special, you're going to have to pay attention to these. But at least for what we're doing, I'm not going to get into those because it can get into the weeds very quickly. So now we've got this whole new batch of information because this is an area of effect projectile. So the first thing you'll notice is we've got a size. So the ISDP, these are in, God, I want to say pixels. And it's something weird. It's like 8.5 pixels is a foot. The upshot of this is 256 basically works out to about a 15-foot radius. So you're going to see 256 a lot, right? That defines, in this case, it's a circle. So 256 means it's a 15-foot circle. You also have the explosion animation, right? This is what plays at the center of the impact, right? Where the fireball explodes, you get this specific animation. And then it uses, I'm sorry, we're still in the VVC. This as the ring animation, right? So this is the bit. Oh, hello again, Choco. You're getting another cattail. Hello, Choco. You did that. All right. So this is the little bit that makes up the expanding ring that goes out from the center of the fireball. And then let's see. Oh, I already covered that. That's the center of the explosion. But I mean, the main thing that's here. Oh, and then you can also set an explosion sound if you want to. I believe in this case, the VVC itself has a sound, I think. Oh, it doesn't. Okay. Well, it's already got an explosion sound set in the projectile header. So, and then again, right, some more things you can tweak about it. So, But that's basically it, right? I mean, the important thing for the area effect is the trap size and explosion size. Now, let's go to trap size and explosion size. Let's look at something like Skull Trap, which I think is it just an S trap? Is it SK trap? I'm just going to pull up the spell. Okay. The symbol spells also do this, but we can just pull it up directly. Skull Trap. Skull Trap uses... Oh, Trap Skull. Okay. So this is the projectile for Skull Trap. Now, you'll notice here the trap size and the explosion size are different. And that's because if you use Skull Trap, obviously you cast it, a little skulls out to a point, and then it waits. And so the trap size is the range at which somebody will set it off. Which in this case, I think this, I need to do the math, but I think this works out to about 8 feet, and the explosion size is 10. It's either like 8 and 10 or 10 and, it's either 8 and 10 or 10 and 12, I think is how it works out. Like you want the trap size to be slightly smaller, because if it's the same size, you run the risk of somebody just like grazing the edge of the area effect and setting it off and having nothing happen. So, and that's especially true if they're moving fast, like with boosts of speed. So you always want the trap size for a projectile like to be slightly smaller than the actual explosion size. So the other thing here is you'll notice there's an allow saving. And this is an EE specific flag. If you set a skull trap on the originals, you cannot save the game. Like it considers that like when you have a web going, right, and the game won't let you save. The originals won't let that. The E's give you the option of like, hey, even if there's a skull trap in the area, you can still save the game. The other thing that's here is, all right, so the projectile, all right, this is just the little traveling skull. It actually uses a custom shadow. This was something that Fireball didn't have. It actually has its own shadow that is skull shaped to match its custom traveling projectile. That's not everything does that, but that is also something else you can designate. I'm trying to remember where in here is it. Here we go. This is what makes Skull Trap wait, right? As soon as it goes to its wherever you target it, this is what makes it just wait there. It's triggered by condition, right? This means that basically somebody has to walk near it for it to go off. It's not something where once you cast it, as soon as it gets to its impact, it just explodes like Fireball. So this is the big thing here. The other thing you'll notice, there's no spread or ring, because right when it goes off, it just like the skull shatters with the handy little sound. Right, there's your skull sounding. It does have its own custom animation for the skull shattering. These are hard coded. Like this is like the list of. It's an animation, so you'd basically have to add an animation to the game. It's not just a BAM in this case. There's already. I was thinking about Entangled, but the short sword of mask already entangle, so I was actually trying to avoid entangle. Thank you for that though. Keep them coming, right? I mean, we're still absolutely at spitballing territory, so good. And while I'm rambling about projectiles, keep it going. One other one I want to look at was, Horrid Wilting is famously party friendly, so let's see how it does that. Horrid Wilting. So Horrid Wilting uses P-Wilt. Why is it P-Wilt? I don't know. So here, the very obvious affect only enemies flag. Right? You want your thing to be party friendly? You want it to affect all enemy. On the flip side, if you have something like Bless and you only want it to affect allies, you've got affect only allies. So these are how you can target an effect to be, friends or foes. If you have a spell like Chant that does positive to you and negative to others, Chant basically casts 2 spells under the hood. One spell uses a projectile that affects enemies. The other spell uses a projectile that only affects friends, and those are both invisible. Chant is. Oh, I'll just look it up. All right, so chant. So you look at chant. Basically, it casts 2 spells, which are D and E. And if you look at D, I think D is the party only. So this is helpful because the projectile is very well named. So if we were to look at this, it's got sounds, but I don't think this actually has. Oh, it does have graphics. I take that back. But you'll notice like this is. Oh yeah. I forgot about this. If it affects only allies, for some reason you have to flag both of these flags to make it. I think that's why it has that star. Because if you actually want it to affect allies, you have to flag both of these. Don't ask me why. Just how the engine works. And then the other one should just be affect enemies. I forgot about that quirk. This is why you always just look at stuff. So this, it's a sparkle. It covers an area. It's purple. And it's not party. Like usually the descriptions are good about stuff like that. Yeah, so this one affects only enemies. All right, and again, 256 because it's a 15-foot radius. There you go. So like I said, not all project. Oh, and then let's also do web. Because web is interesting because it's a repeating projectile. Spell wizard 2. Second level effect. It's here somewhere. Here's web. All right. So good old web. All right. So again, it's you have a travel sound. You have the most obnoxious sound effect in the entire game. Oh, just drink it in. Why does this sound have anything to do with web? Just, it's so obnoxious. And it's so nice because it just repeats and just makes web insufferable. Okay. So that's web. Those are your travel sounds. What am I looking for? Where is the... I think it might be here. Number of repetitions. Here you go. So basically, this is what tells it you're going to go to a space, just like Fireball, right? You're going to have an impact. You're going to have like a spread. Like when it first hits, it does like that web spread, and then it plays little web things popping up randomly inside its area of effect. Is this? Oh no, that's not it. And then it sticks around for 10 repetitions. So this is basically what tells web to stick around for as long as it does. Because web is 10 rounds? 1 turn, yeah. So 10 rounds. So it repeats 10 times, right? If you want it to last 5 rounds, it would repeat 5 times. That repetition is basically in rounds. Again, right, it's another 256, which means it's another 15-foot radius. The explosion frequency, this, if I remember right, it's in frames, and the game runs at 30 FPS. So every 2.5 seconds, I think it spawns another little, blob of web inside its area. And the repeating stuff is set. Where do you... Oh, shoot. Hold on. Let me bring this back up. Is it this? No, that's the travel animation. I forget where you designate the smaller animations that play. Maybe it is in another... Maybe it is in this projectile. I think it might be. No, because that doesn't have any animation set at all. There's someplace in here where you designate like the smaller animations that pop up. Oh, I think it's just this. I think it might be hard-coded. Yeah, I think it is. Because like there's Storm of Vengeance, there's Stinking Cloud. Okay. So this web is like a hard-coded effect to play within the area of effect. This is how you tell it what graphics to play. So Stinking Cloud does something like this. Cloud Kill does something like this. Storm of Vengeance basically any like area of denial effects. Like in Icewind Dale, you'd have spike trap, spike growth. The vastly superior Icewind Dale web. Ice Storm does it. Meteor Swarm also does it. Right? It's basically you have a continuous animation playing in an area for a fixed number of rounds. And this is how you do it. For a cone-shaped projectile, let's pull up good old Cone of Cold because it's obviously the most obvious. So Cone of Cold. Let's pull up the projectile. So Cone of Cold is an area effect. Now here, it's cone-shaped. And so now the explosion size is now like the length of the cone. And you'll notice it's 300 because the length of the cone, I want to say, is either 19 or 20 feet. So it's, if 256 is 15, we've gone a little further because it's a 19-foot cone. And also, it's a 90-degree cone. So this is, wherever you target, you get 45 degrees to either side as the area of effect. I think Burning Hands is the other one that I think of that has a cone tack. Silver Dragon Breath, I think it also is a cone. I don't think Unfinished Business restores them, but Hellhound Breath attacks are also a cone. Cones are not that common, but there are options for it. In Icewind Dale, Thorn Spray is also a cone-shaped attack. But that's basically it. You basically set the cone width. This is the length of the cone. And then, like I said, the cone width is the degrees. And then again, the explosion effect is also hard-coded, right? You can see that this is kind of your list of stuff that you can select from. As far as I know, I don't think you can extend this list because I believe this is hard-coded. It does say custom, but I'd have to look in the ISDP because it has been a long, long time since I've tried to do graphics and custom stuff. And then finally, let's jump over to Icewind Dale because Wall of Moonlight was something that I remember this was something that gave Avenger, DLTC EP Avenger, not Rogue Rebalancing Avenger. He actually implemented this, and I remember it was a lot of wonk to get it to fit into the existing projectile format. Because original Baldur's Gate and original Icewind Dale, no projectile files. These are something introduced by Baldur's Gate 2. All the projectiles in OBG and Icewind Dale are all hard-coded. So David and I, as part of Icewind Dale and BG2, had to convert and figure out a bunch of hard-coded projectiles to get them to work on Baldur's Gate 2. Wall of Moonlight was one of the ones we couldn't because it needed engine level changes, which Avenger did. And honestly, I'm probably not going to remember exactly how it works, but it is an area of effect. Here it is. You have to flag it as a rectangular AoE. And then the trap and the explosion size are now become the width and the height, if I remember correctly. And then it lasts for a turn. And this is, I believe, the animation. Yeah, this should be. Yeah, so this is the Wall of Moonlight. So it's basically you essentially set a ground trap, and if undead walk across it, they take like a ton of damage. But yeah, this was a treat for him to get it to work. I actually do have this working on Icewindification for original Baldur's Gate 2, but I basically do it by it's basically a fake projectile. It's round. Like in the EEs, you actually have to cross this very specific area to get the damage. On OBG2, I fake it. It's basically a round area that looks square. So like you could walk like through here and you would get damage. So it's faked, but that's kind of the best we could do for original Baldur's Gate 2. But yeah, this was something that Avenger had to code up special, and I was excited because this is such a cool looking spell. It really is. And given that Icewind Dale has, Brazilians of undead, this is one of those spells that is just really, 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 really useful. The downside is, I think it's also like a level 6 spell. So the problem is, it's for the level it is, it's not all that useful, but it's just, I love how it looks. It's such a cool looking spell. So, but yeah, as I recall, these two fields are basically changed to something entirely. And if you read the ISDP, like, they have a whole field about, like, when it's rectangular and it's a rectangular AoE, here's all the fields that completely change their meaning. And the big ones are these, because yeah, this is, I'm pretty sure these are the height and the width when it's a rectangular animation. I'm trying to think, what other type of projectiles do we have that are notable? I talked about, you can set a projectile with no graphics, right? If you just want something to invisibly, if you want something to just invisibly, affect an area without, without a visible sign, right? You can also, the projectile itself doesn't have to have animations, because you could have, right, if you put like a play VVC, like an opcode 215 in the spell itself, all the projectile does is determine like the cosmetics and the sound effects and who gets affected. And if somebody's in the area of effect, if they get affected, right, you can set it enemies versus allies. But the creatures that are affected, what happens to them is still set by the spell. So you can have an invisible projectile and then have the spell payload include, like, play a cosmetic effect on these creatures. I think, for example, I think Bless does both, right? It plays a Bless, it plays a little animation at the center of the area of effect, but then every creature that's affected also gets a little Bless animation played on them. So it could be one or it could be both. It just depends. Like for Fireball, right? Fireball's a very visually impressive spell. It's a ball of fire and it explodes. So you need something like that. Like Chant doesn't necessarily need graphics. So it depends on the spell, but that's kind of your intro to projectiles. And with all that being said, we're actually going to do something very, very simple with projectiles. The other thing you need to worry about as a modder with projectiles is the game has like a master list of projectiles, right? If you let's go back and look at an arrow really quick, right? So let's go back to item. Oh, sorry. Let's just look at any arrow. So this projectile, it's a value, right? This field is a 2-byte numeric value. So in this field, if you were to look at this in next there, it's just 2. And the reason why is because it's pulling this from a list. This is pulling this from projectile.ids, right? These are all of your allowed values. So when you add a projectile to the game, it needs to be added to this IDS for the game to know, like, hey, when I tell you I want to use projectile 5, you need to find arrow.pro and use that. So Waidu has a command to add projectiles so that it will basically like copy the projectile to the game and then add an entry for you, and then also set a variable so that you can use that projectile in your new item or spell. So I mentioned that we were not going to use the existing spear projectile. We're actually going to make a copy of it, and I'm going to show you why. Let's go back to this is the right one. Yep. Let's take a quick look at protection from normal missiles. Protection from normal missiles works by explicitly blocking certain projectiles. Arrow, heavy, axe, bolt, and bullet. This is a normal arrow. This is a normal throwing axe. This is a normal bolt. This is a normal bullet. Bullets +1 use a different projectile. Bullets +2, sunstone. Any magic bullet does not use this projectile. And you'll notice on this list is spear. This is the existing spear projectile. So if we were to make this javelin and just use the default spear, protection from normal missiles would block it. And since it's going to be a magical spear, obviously we don't want that to be the case. So we're essentially going to clone this existing spear projectile into a new projectile so that it will have a different value, even if visually it's going to look the same. And it's purely to avoid this interaction with protection from normal weapons. Now, the good news is I've already done the groundwork for this because item upgrade already has throwing spears, and I had to do it for that. So I'm just going to grab the relevant code from item upgrade. I'm just going to open up. So, and because it's used by 3 different items, that's why it has all these extra cards. So it basically says, if there's not already the new spear projectile in the game, or if it does exist, look up its existing value. I should have mentioned missile is basically a copy of projectile with essentially the same information. So if this projectile is already in the game, just look up and get its existing projectile value and add it to the CD spear variable. If this is not in the game, then we basically take the existing spear projectile, make a copy of it, and then we use add projectile. Now, add projectile, basically what it does is normally it's coming from like your mod folder. So it would copy whatever projectile file you give it to the override folder. And then the other thing that it does is the name of the projectile gets set as a variable. So if this adds CD Spear as projectile number 317, then CD Spear gets set to 317, and then I can use that in my copy. So for example, in here for item upgrade, let's see, it's going to be items common. I can just... So I use it here on the ranged header to set it as a projectile. This is a little complicated because I was already doing a loop for the flags, but this is, since I was already there, I basically did it. In fact, actually, we could probably copy most of this code. I think I will. All right, so we're going to grab this library just outright. We're going to grab the CD Spear. We're going to bring that to G3CIP and drop that into the library. And we're actually just going to do the same thing. We're going to, because the other thing I did was, you'll notice, remember how I mentioned how the ranged flags are different between the E's and the original? If I remember correctly, I think I just... Yeah, that's what I do. So basically, for item upgrade, I basically say, hey, Azure Edge, what are you, for the existing Azure Edge, what are you using as its throwing flags? And then I use that as a template for everything else. So I think we'll do the exact same thing. So in fact, we can just copy this. We'll bring this over into... So whatever flags Azure Edge is using, strength bonuses or whatever, we're going to use that as the basis for our javelin. So we're going to get the strength. We don't need the throwing projectile because item upgrade needs that because it upgrades Azure Edge. We're not doing that. We're going to set the failsafe. We just want the throwing flags. So basically what this does is it copies Azure Edge, looks through the ability, finds type equals 2. This is Azure Edge ranged attacks. And then it reads whatever flags are there and saves them in the throwing flags variable. And then we're going to do exactly what item upgrade does. And we're going to take those throwing flags. Actually, we don't. Okay, for the spears. Here we go. Oh, in fact, we probably need that as well. Okay, I'll explain this in one moment. All right. So like I said, I've gone through throwing spears with item upgrade before. So I know kind of some of the things we have to look out for. So we've done the identified name. We've done the identified description. We already covered that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look through the abilities. I'm again looking for type equals 2. Type 2 abilities are, let me bring the item back up. The type 2 is the ranged ability. Let me go to item. All right, G3. Oh, I'm in the wrong directory. God dang it. There we go. I really just need to bookmark this. This was meant to be a temporary install. That's why I haven't done it. All right, so on the ranged ability. So we're basically, like I said, on the original Baldur's Gate, this is going to be just add strength bonus. On the EEs, it's the damage strength bonus because we only want the strength bonus for damage, not also for to hit. That's the difference between the two. So basically, it's going to look at whatever Azure Edge is using and use that as our basis. So that's what this bit is doing here with the throwing flags, right? We read it from Azure Edge. As soon as we have it, we kill the loop because there's no point in going further. And then we also have a default flag. In case something crazy has happened to Azure Edge and it no longer has a throwing ability, we want at least a default value for it, just in case. So we basically look through our own item, we find the throwing flags, and then we also use the CD Spear projectile. And actually the one thing I think I haven't done is I need to grab, because I do that in a library, I also need this. Except we're no longer in item upgrade. We're now in G3 CIP, still lib, CD Spear. So this will add the projectile if it doesn't exist. If it does exist already, it will just, like, say if item upgrade has already been installed and CD Spear is already in the game, it'll just say, hey, it's already here. Let's grab the value. Right? Easy, nice and easy. And if it's not there, then it adds it. Either way, we get a variable named CD Spear set to the correct value of the projectile. And then we just assign it to the ranged ability. This chunk of code right here, Royal Protector and I, with Icewind both have a component that ups spear damage. Actually, I need to, you know what? I may need to double check this because I'm not sure if Royal Protector does it. I'm not sure if he accounts for throwing spears. For now, I'm going to leave this in just in case. But basically what this does is, yeah, okay. So what it's doing is, oh, I'm also going to have to designate old and new. All right. I'm going to have to come back to this because essentially what it does is if Icewindification is installed, it basically ups the dice size. So with the increased spear damage from Icewindification, it should be doing, instead of 1d4, it should be doing 1d6 as base damage. And then its range damage would go from 1d6 to 1d8. And then this basically updates the description to the new damage values. However, I think this is meant very specifically to go from 6 to 8 and does not account for the 4 to 6 that we'd be doing. So I probably need to reevaluate this and take a look. So for now, I am just going to comment this out. That's going to be a future compatibility thing I need to come back to, because I also need to find the old and new Where do I like here? Where do I set old? I suspect somewhere here at the top. Here it is. Yeah, so it's basically pulling strings directly from item upgrades tray file. So I'm gonna need to double check that, and we may need to add new strings so I can properly match these. So for now, I'm just going to comment that out. But that is something I need to do, right? This is a compatibility thing. If Icewind Vacation is installed after this, it will just do it. It will update the descriptions itself. It will change the damage. It will take care of all that itself. And I'm assuming Royal Protector's stuff also does. But this code is basically there so that if somebody installs the item pack after Icewind Vacation or after Royal Protector stuff, we're still accounting for those changes, and our spear still gets the updates that's intended for all the other spears. But like I said, I need to double check because these matches will need to be specific to this spear. So, but I will check that. But otherwise, right, we should now have the CD spear. So let's go ahead and run this and see if we're getting all the proper updates here. So we're off to a good start. Line 397 near end. I'm probably missing a... Oh, yeah, because this is part of that patch F. That's why we have a spare end. There we go. All right, let's check the item in game again. Let's go to item G3C. So melee, it's still using no projectile, but for ranged, it's now using cdspear.pro, which is just a copy of spear. And again, the only reason why we did this is so that this magical spear, when thrown, will not get blocked by protection from normal missiles. That's literally it. This is exactly spear.pro. If we're ambitious, we could change spear.bam to be green like the item itself, but being as this is also used by 3 throwing spears from item upgrade, that's kind of more of a future project, because this is 5 cycles times 6 frames, so this is like 24 image edits for something that's going to be on screen for such a short time that very few people are going to notice and know about, except of course us, because I'm talking about it. But otherwise, I'm perfectly content just using the existing spear.bam. So the 2 other things I wanted to cover are doing BAMs, which I think we're adding an item mainly because I'm using it as an excuse to talk about projectiles and BAMs. So, and then we're also going to do an item upgrade with it. We still have a bunch of new items or item suggestions from the original thread that I just never got to. I don't think we're going to... I'm not actually opening up for new items. This was an idea I had just to do like a proof of concept for a lot of the stuff. So we're well over the 2-hour mark. Let's take a very quick break. When we come back, we're going to do an item BAM. We're going to talk about BAMs generally, and then we're going to do the item BAM for this specifically. And again, talk about the differences between the original and the enhanced edition. So let's go take another quick break, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes because I definitely need a throat drop and some tea. So sit tight. We'll be right back. All right. So let's talk BAMs. I don't want to say most. Actually, probably most artwork that you see in the game comes ultimately from a BAM. So a BAM is basically a graphics file that has frames and cycles within those frames. So and they can also just be static, right? The simplest BAM is something like a spell icon that has just a single frame and a single cycle. Pretty much any spell icon, this is one frame and one cycle. So if we look inside, what's got? All right, it's got two identical frames. I don't know why, but it's got two frames that you then organize into cycles. So probably the way to think about this would be if you think about, say, like watching a video, right? A video is basically a series of still images that gets played to provide an animation. So each one of those individual frames, just like in a movie, is a frame of art. And then you organize these into cycles. In this case, it's a static image. So each cycle is just a static image. Right? There's no actual animation for this. If you look at something more complicated, like, oh, yes, I do want to describe that. A monster animation, like let's look at like a wyvern. Now you've got 15 cycles of multiple frames, right? And on top of that, look at all these. These are all wyvern, all these mwyve. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 20 something different animations for the wyvern. Oh, because it's the wyvern and the greater wyvern. Okay. So some of these are just like it's idle animation. Some of these are empty. And then something like 21. I think this might be attack finally. No, these are still the idols. The good news is the IESD. Oh, yeah, this one's got 79 cycles. This is going to be the big main animation. We can just find something. Oh, I know why. Because this is a BAM that we combined. That's why. This is originally a 4-part animation that eFixPex has combined into one. So it's basically one with everything and then 3 empty animations. That's why. Because this used to be a 4-quadrant animation that we've turned into a single because the E's can handle that. So you got like its idle animation, you got its frozen animation. Somewhere in here there will be attacks. There's a death/sleep. And from multiple angles. That's the death animation. And so each one of these is, if you were to look at one of these, right? We go into edit BAM. You've got 81 frames composed into 79 cycles, many of which are multiple frames. Right? So you run the gambit from one frame that is one cycle that is essentially static to something like a monster animation, which is hundreds of frames and, many cycles. If you want a quick look into madness on the ISDP, take a look at the... actually, let me just pull it up really quick. Where is it? There it is. On the ISDP, the avatar naming schemes is wild. Because you essentially had the Baldur's Gate guys were making animations at the same time that the Icewind Dale guys were making animations. So right from the get-go, you had two different groups making animations with different schemes and names and approaches. Then you also had Planescape Torment, which was also doing something on their own. Then Baldur's Gate did something slightly different. So you'll see we've got Icewind Dale style. Oh, and then you need something entirely different for the characters. So if you look at something like most monster animations, usually, like if you look at goblins, there's like 5 different goblin animations. That's because one has an axe, one has a bow, one is like an elite with an axe, one is an elite with a bow. Because the weapons are actually included in the animation. So you need a separate animation depending on what you want the goblin to look like when they're equipped. Most other animations, for example, lizardmen, have support maybe 1 or 2 weapons. So I think lizardmen support staves and halberds. And if you give them anything else, they attack barehanded. And so how it does it is, if you look at lizardmen, there's like the base animation, and then like the weapon that they have equipped gets overlaid on top of that. So if you were to, so depending on which, if the lizardman is facing like away from you, so the weapon is like blocked by their body, if you look at the weapon animation, it actually has a cutout for where the lizardman would be, because it doesn't properly layer them. Right, the weapon is always on top of the lizard man, so it basically has to be cut out to leave a hole. So it's just one of the first things that when Baldur's Gate 2 came out, everyone went, "Oh my god, the flaming swords look terrible," and they did, and everybody wanted them changed. But it would literally take somebody editing like thousands of frames of weapon animations, because you're not just updating a flaming sword, you're updating a flaming sword for a male elf, a female elf, in cleric, fighter, so each one you have each race you have a male and a female, and then you have like a cleric, a mage, a fighter, and who am I missing? And a rogue. I mean, not all races have all classes, but right? So you can see this multiplies very quickly. And then considering each one of those has potentially, a couple hundred frames each, you're looking at a massive, massive project. It wasn't until finally FRN did it for One Pixel Productions. A very, very apt name for that mod. I don't think people appreciate just how awful it was to bring that flaming sword. Thankfully, the EEs have it by default. But if you look at original Baldur's Gate 2 without One Pixel Productions, it's just a glowing blade. I mean, they look terrible, but it was just so much effort. And this is one of the reasons why, like if you look at Icewindification or anything else that adds two-handed axes, we just use halberd animations, right? It is not worth it to try and do a new weapon animation. Same with, it's always bothered me that wakazashis are straight blades. I had looked into maybe I could just take the katana animations and just shorten them a little bit, because a wakazashi is just basically a smaller version of a katana. Again, just editing just hundreds of frames, and basically at a pixel level. I mean, there's no way to automate it. It's just awful. So my free advice is to try and stay away from creature animations as much as you can, because it's just madness. I know Artisan has done a wonderful job lately he has come up with a scheme and wrote a tutorial about bringing in animations, I think from Neverwinter Nights and Neverwinter Nights 2. And if you've looked on the Discord, on the IE Discord, and also on his own, he's showing some of the stuff that he's done, including palading some of them, which is another can of worms that's just awful. They're beautiful, and I know he's basically said anybody can use them. I know Morpheus has used some of them for Tactics Remix. They look really nice, but there's a reason why there's generally not a lot of monster animations and stuff like that done in the game, because it's just awful. So, but that I'm just bringing that up to show that, like, BAMs can be literally anything, right? From a static one frame image to something monstrously complex when you get to like character animations. And if you ever want to see just how awful they are, this is a good page to discourage you from ever trying to mess with them. So this is the Avatar naming schemes page on IESDP. I can only imagine the guys trying to figure this out, because this was... The other thing too is on OBG2, these are also all hard-coded. EE's soft-coded a lot of this animation information, but basically, like, if you wanted to bring an animation from like Icewind Dale into Baldur's Gate, you had to find a slot, or if you're bringing in something like bringing on Diablo animations, something that was popular, you'd have to find like an open existing slot and then try to match up. Like, all the slots are hard-coded. Like, this one has a personal size of 3, or this one has a personal size of 5. So you couldn't bring over like a human animation in a spot meant for a dragon, because then they'd have like a giant selection circle instead of, you know, the tiny one that a character should have. So it was just awful. Gwendolyn and the whole Infinity Animations, that's what it's called, put together a whole mod that did that for the originals, and it's an amazing piece of work, and that's another one of those things where I don't think people appreciate just how much work went into making it happen. You know, there's some stuff like that you can do, right? Like, you can do some palette shifting and some other stuff, but for the most part, it's just it's awful to deal with, and I would say stay far away from those. Thankfully, what we're going to do is think a lot simpler. So we're going to do an item BAM. So for this, I'm actually going to jump back to original Baldur's Gate 2, and I'll explain why when we get there. So where's my... there it is. And we're going to grab that aforementioned... We based it on the generic +3 spear. So this is the BAM we want to start with. And the reason why we're starting here is there are two big differences between BAMs in the originals and the EEs. In the originals, actually, there's more than that, but let's focus on 2 for now. In the originals, all of the item icons are 2-frame. So if you were to pick up an item in your inventory and move around the inventory screen, you get this, like the full item. If you were to equip it and then go to the game screen, the little icon for attacking or using the item uses this smaller icon. And usually, like, if it's... For hammers, it's a little more pronounced. Like, you get the full hammer, and then you just get like the hammer head. For swords, it's usually the whole thing. For spears, it's usually just the spearhead. Staves, you also only get a part of it, and same with halberds. So depending on the... Like, daggers basically use nearly identical for the 2. So there's 2 notable differences. One is that the icon for moving around the screen, you can see, is bigger. It also has a shadow. The smaller one that appears just in the UI, no shadow, and also a lot smaller. Another big difference is on the originals, this is basically 32 by 32. This is 64 by 64, or up to, I should say. It can be smaller. On the EEs, you can make these as big as you want, and it will scale it for you down to 64 by 64. So you really do need to handle these as entirely different BAMs. The other thing about BAMs is they're a binary format, right? You're not going to... It's not like an item where you can go ahead and like, oh, I just want to change the damage, or I just want to change the weight, or I just want to, you know, increase the lore score or whatever. If you're making a BAM, you're probably just going to overwrite whatever's there. And generally that's fine, because the number of mods that actually mess with BAMs, with existing BAMs, are actually pretty small. So there's not much of a conflict there in terms of, you know, incompatibilities. So just know if you're making BAMs or updating BAMs, you're probably going to be replacing existing ones. There's no real good way to patch stuff like this. There's been a little bit, like, I know David, for some of the Icewind Dale spells, Icewind Dale has a different scheme for icon colors for spells. Like, they use green and they use purple a little bit. And so he had written an algorithm that would go in and actually adjust RGB values directly to change, you know, something that's white to green or something like that. But that's a very specific and special cases. For the most part, you're just going to make a new BAM and override it. So one other, oh, and then one last thing to be aware for the EEs. The EEs introduced BAM v2, which is a completely different format and actually relies on the same compression, the PVRZ that they used for areas. And they're just a pain in the ass to work with. The good news is if you find a BAM, like a V2 BAM in the EEs, Near Infinity will let you just export it as a version 1 BAM, which I would highly recommend you do that, because it's not worth working with a version 2. And they're EE specific, right? You'd have to convert them down anyway if you want to make BAMs for the original games. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this BAM. We're going to bring it into, I have a little working folder where I do all my BAM work. We're going to use a program called Bammer to convert it into pings. We're going to make edit to the pings, and then we're going to use the same Bammer program to convert it back into a new BAM. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to export it. We're going to export it. Original decompress doesn't matter because we're about to pull it out anyway. So let's see where I have this. This is in, let's see, my documents. It's going to be in mod packaging. And I think I have it under BAM work. There it is, BAM work. All right. Okay. So, and like I said, remember the E's just have one frame. So we're actually going to make 2 BAMs. One is going to be for the original, and one is going to be for the EEs only. All right, so let's head over to our BAM work folder. We've got the BAM here. I'm going to go ahead and make a folder of the same name. Now, there are 2 programs that can do this, and I have them both here. We have Bammer, and then we have Sam wrote a program called PSBAM. PSBAM is pretty much superior in every way. And the only reason why I don't use it is I got so used to using Bammer well ahead of this. And what I'm doing with BAMs is so simple. I've never needed the expanded capabilities of PSBAM. But for all of you guys, if you're doing it your first time, I would suggest just start on PSBAM, because you probably will find uses for all the advanced features. For me, it's just I've used Bammer for so long that that's just what I'm going to use today. But using PSBAM is also a command line tool and can also do pretty much what we're doing today. So let's go and open up a command window here. So Bammer was a program written by Scott Brooks, who was our lead programmer at CamDawg. And the reason why he wrote Bammer was so that the art department would never, ever have to deal with BAMs. So basically, if you were to look in the CamDawg repo, we had like an art folder with just, hundreds of pings. And so if the art department said, hey, we need a new spear graphic, or, we need a new UI element or whatever, something that would end up as a BAM, they would just provide the art or provide an updated piece of art. And then when the nightlies or the production builds were made, Bammer would basically, with a small set of instructions called a BAMD, would basically take just their pings and turn it into a BAM, so that they never ever had to deal with BAMs. All they did was like, here's a nice ping, go to town, and then Bammer would do the rest. So we're going to use, so Bammer's command line options are very simple. We're going to use iSpear06.bam as the input. We're going to use that folder we just created as the output. Now, I'm just going to run this once just to show you this really quick. So if you just run it, it spits out a bunch of information for you. This is what should be in the BAMD. So this is useless to us in the command window. So we're going to run that again, except this time we're going to pipe that into a BAMD file. I think on Linux, you use a pipe here. You might actually be able to use a pipe in DOS too. I don't know, but this is how I do it. So notice this time we won't get that output, but we will. You'll notice it's created a text file with that output. So it basically, this is basically a text representation of what we saw in Near Infinity, right? If you look at this in Near Infinity and you edit, you've got 2 frames. Note that they have an X and a Y coordinate, and they're placed into 2 cycles. So let's bring up that BAMD again, and you can see this is just basically that information. You've got 2 frames, and it's output the visual part of that frames to these pings. Switching back and forth between these two is a little bit of pain. Notice it's got the offsets, the -2, -1. And the center is the X and the Y. And then it's got a sequence. The first sequence is frame 1. The second sequence is frame 0. So this is basically just a text file with all of this information. And more importantly, if we look into the output folder, we now have these 2 BAMs. Now, it uses lime green to designate this is transparency. We'll take care of that when we get into Photoshop. But basically, these are all the frames from that BAM. So now let me fire up Photoshop, and we're going to do some very, very, very simple edits to turn these green, and that's all we're going to do, right? The Photoshop part we're just going to gloss over because this is basically. Let me drag these over here. Because this would be, if you actually know what you're doing. Oh, why did we? Come on, there we go. These are going to be where your. Oh, and why did you disappear my layers? Okay, there we go. This would be, as an artist, you would actually do amazing things. This is where me as a non-artist is going to do very, very simple things. So the first thing we want to do is BAMs are paletted. So the first thing we want to do is we want to image. We want to get rid of the palette. We just want to go to a straight RGB. Next is we want to go to the transparency. So we're going to select, I don't want contiguous. All right, we're going to select the inverse. And we're going to do a new layer via cut. Where's my, there it is. New layer via cut. All right. So now we have this without the transparency. So the nice thing is Bammer supports transparency and ping. So we don't need to actually include the lime green in the work we're doing. So I'm actually just going to delete that. So now let's zoom in. So we're going to greenify this spear, but we don't want to greenify the shadow, right? The shadow should remain black. So let's see. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put the shadow on a new layer via cut. Now we have just the item, right? Any adjustments we do to this layer is not going to affect the shadow. And so here we're going to do the laziest possible editing we can do. So actually first let's prep the other one in these. We're going to take the exact same steps for this, except it has no shadow. That's going to be the only difference. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go image mode. We want to get it out of the index. We want to select inverse, new layer via cut, and then we're going to dump the lime green. So this has also been stripped down to just the art. Now, your graphic programs will have it differently, but image mode, adjustments. Here we go. Is it? Obviously, it's been a while since I've done this. I think it's levels. No, it's not levels. Oh, I think it's hue saturation. Yeah, here we go. Woo, we got sliders. We can turn it super blue. We can turn it very red and very purple. We can make it very light and very dark. So we want to make it kind of green. So this is oftentimes you have to play with it to get it just kind of dialed in. Oh, we're getting some nice lime in there. That might be a little tealish. There we go, something like this. All right, so 84, -3, -1. We're going to make the exact same changes here. Image, adjustment, 84, -3, and you do this because hold on. I think I did a -3 twice. And if you're wondering why my Photoshop looks so old, it's because it is. This is CS5 because I will not pay Adobe for a license ever, as long as they're doing software as a service. I bought this. This is my last version. I'm never going to give it up. All right, so we've adjusted these both to be green, and you notice we can just add back in the shadow. The shadow is still black. And now we're just going to save these because they're pings. Oh, I need to flatten first. Okay. Layer. I want to flatten these back into one image because it took away my transparency. All right. I wasn't flattened. I think I just need to combine the layers. God, I'm sorry. It's been so long since I've really played around with Photoshop this much. Merge layers. There we go. And now I should just be able to save. Okay. Yeah, because I don't want to save this as a Photoshop. I want to keep this as a ping. So good news is this one, there's only one layer, so I can just save. Both of these have been saved. So if we go back to our folders, you'll notice these are now green and transparent. So the nice thing is, so like I said, this was super lazy, right? We didn't change the size, so we don't need to mess around with resizing the BAM or choosing new XY coordinates because the ones that we have are already fine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come back to BAMR. And like I said, this is just an example just to show that we've changed something. But you can do completely new art. You can make it a different size. It can be, what we do to simple edits, you can just start with new artwork entirely. This is just to kind of show the process. So now we're going to take those two pings and using the instructions in the BAMD, we're going to do the opposite process. We're going to turn this into a new BAM. So in this case, we're going to go BAMR. In this case, the input is the BAMD because this is the instructions of how to take these pings and turn them into a new BAM. And so the output is going to be the new BAM that we want to make, which is the G3EverI.BAM. And let's see. And so it takes care of the palette, it takes care of the transparency, it takes care of all that stuff. So if we've done it right, which is a big if, we should be able to let's just drag the file in and see how this looks. And see if we have an actual recognizable game BAM. Oh, where did oh, there it is. Ta-da! Brand new green spear. Same two frames. It's all nice and centered. Boom. So this is the correct BAM for OBG2. So really quickly, we're going to make a separate BAM for the EEs. And so hold on really quick. So this is the only frame and BAM that the EEs are going to use. It's going to be the big one. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a copy of the BAMD because we're going to alter it somewhat. And I'm just going to name this I06 EE. In this case, this is the actual frame that we want. So we're going to delete frame 0. This is now going to become frame 0. And there's just going to be one sequence of that frame. And so now we're going to run Bammer again. Except this time we're using iSphere 06 EE, and we're going to name it also just _E, just to so that it doesn't overwrite the other one. And now let's see if that one works. We should now have a new BAM here. We do. Let's go to open file. And we have a single cycle BAM that is just the large image. Now, this is a little involved. I get that. And I will say, Argent has done some amazing things, right? If you bring up Edit BAM, you can actually add artwork directly here, right? You can import from another BAM. You can add files and add resources. These are, like, we could just add the pings directly here as frames and then manually assemble them into new cycles. You could, if you add more frames, it'll all show up here, and then you can make the cycle manually here and then save it directly out of Near Infinity. So you don't have to use Bammer. You don't have to use Photoshop. This is how I do it, because especially if I'm just doing something simple like an item BAM, I find this a lot easier. Near Infinity may work for you depending on what you're doing. It just depends on how comfortable you are with a command line, or if you like doing this better. But all of this, like this BAM editing, this is all stuff that Argent has added, I want to say, over the past like 2 or 3 years, and it's really, really amazing. I haven't played around with it nearly as much as I should, but it's super powerful. Like I said, Bammer is, out of the options that are out there now, is probably one of the worst options, because there's Near Infinity directly, which actually does a wonderful job now. Sam's PS BAM tool is probably superior to Bammer in just about every way. And Sam is one of those guys that knows BAMs like forwards and backwards and inside and out. So PS BAM has all sorts of little, like, very, very specialized niche options that probably Sam only understands entirely, right? For what I'm doing, I'm making an item BAM. I've turned it green, right? I don't need PS BAM for that. It's like way overkill for what I'm doing. But for you guys starting out making your BAMs, I would suggest taking the time for PS BAM. Sam is great about asking questions. So if you're just like, dude, this has got too many options, or what's the command line for doing this or that? It also has a GUI, so it's not just command line. Ask Sam. That would be my recommendation, right? If you're doing something simple, yeah, you can muddle through with Bammer. You can do it with Near Infinity. So you have other options. This is just how I do it, and the most comfortable way I have of doing stuff. So, but the upshot of all this is that we've made our BAMs, and that's essentially it, right? I mean, BAMs are just a sequence of frames that you assemble into cycles for different things. How the engine uses those is hard coded, right? I mean, remember we went through the Wyvern and it had like 79 cycles. The engine determines which cycle to use, when it's attacking, when it's facing east, when it's being put to sleep, when it's using its attack 1, when it's using attack 2, when it's using attack 3, when it's idling, right? I mean, the order of those cycles matter, so you're always better off grabbing something existing and working from it, right? Not for this one, but for the OBG2, the first cycle is the BAM that it's going to use when you pick it up and move it around the screen. The second cycle is what it's going to use when it's being used as an icon, right? I mean, if you reverse these 2 cycles, you're going to get the wrong artwork in the wrong place. So whenever possible, always work from an existing thing and use it as a template. The other thing that's a little weird, I always follow this by convention. It's not actually needed, but you'll notice like the frames are 0 and 1, and then the cycle plays them in reverse order. All of the original Baldur's Gate 2 BAMs are like this. I don't know why. I don't think it's actually necessary, but it's still a convention I follow, right? Cycle 0 is always frame 1. Cycle 1 is always frame 0. I don't think it actually matters, but I still always follow that. Just make sure that cycle 0 is the big and cycle 1 is the small. What actual frames they are, I don't think actually matters. So that is your very, very simple item BAM tutorial. I'm going to go back to the mod and add those. And being as we are coming up on 3 hours, that is absolutely definitely going to be it for today. So thanks for joining us. We actually covered quite a bit more than I thought we would today, so I'm really happy with that. Tomorrow, we're going to add an ability to the spear. Thank you for all the suggestions. I know I didn't reply to all of them, but I'm going to take a look at those now as the stream ends. And like I said, if you think of one later, just go to the thread on G3 and be like, hey, how about making the spear do this? And keep in mind, I want it to be something where it does it, and then when it upgrades it, either does it a little bit better or does it a little more often. That's what I'm looking at in terms of an upgrade. So keep the suggestions coming. I'm going to go back in chat and read your suggestions and think about it too, because maybe I'll come up with something as well. And then tomorrow we'll pick up with using Sespinar or Cromwell to do an item upgrade and how to do that. And then depending on the time, I think I'm trying to think of what are the remaining requests we have of stuff to cover. I know that somebody in the YouTube comments from the first series asked about using arrays. So that's going to be a very kind of nerdy why do question. So we'll talk a little bit about using arrays and how they can be useful, but also the pitfalls of arrays. And then I'm trying to think, what other topics do we still have that people have asked for? I think we might be coming to the end of topics. But if you guys, again, right, go to the thread. If there's something else where you're like, how do you do this or how do you do this, right? One of the things that ties in very tightly with BAMs are like VVCs. VVCs are basically a wrapper that play BAMs in very, very specific orders, usually for spell animations. So VVCs are very tightly tied with BAM. So if you want to do a little more on the graphical side, it's not my specialty, but I can at least give you an overview of VVCs. But again, right, anything that you guys are looking for, anything you guys want to talk, as part of Cromwell and Sespinar, we'll probably be doing dialogue again. So maybe we'll go into a little more depth with dialogue. We talked a little triggers and actions with scripting, but we can also discuss triggers and actions in dialogues because there are some subtleties in how they work and all that stuff. So, but yes, that will definitely be it for today. We will see you tomorrow, same time. Whatever time this stream started for you today locally is what time it's going to start for you tomorrow and Thursday, or on tomorrow and Friday. Saturday's still up in the air. I'm not sure if I'm going to do Saturday or not. It kind of depends on how the next couple days go and how much interest and questions we have for topics to cover. So again, thank you all for joining, and we will see you tomorrow. So thanks a lot, guys, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.